Hello, everyone. Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and we're here for a number 10 question and answer. Let's get to that first question, which is what I labeled the video as. Now, I think I have it linked down below. Several years ago, Patrick and I did a video about how to get your spouse on board with frugality and preparedness. But I just wanted to cover that again because this is just about anybody. This is about any kind of family member, friend, or whatever. So this question came in, and it's an important question where somebody was asking, how do I get my family to understand? How do I get them to start doing these same things? There's a lot of issues that we have when it comes to trying encouraging family to do the same thing. And one of them is that if they feel that you're telling them what to do, what they should do, that right there is probably what is stopping them first. Not even the other stuff, just the fact that you're saying you should. I'm not saying that's the wording everybody's using. Even the most gentle wording is still going to come out as you should. And you need to be like me. And that's going to be a massive turnoff, and nobody's going to want to listen. And then the second problem that most people face, and while a lot of times they don't get a lot of people listening to them, is that, that just want to turn them off. It's the focusing on the more crazy stuff that can happen. I'm not saying it's all crazy. I mean, we saw what happened in North Carolina. We've seen all this stuff that's happened. And so it's not that there are things that don't happen, but usually these are such big catastrophes that don't happen as often that it's really, really easy for people to say, that's not going to happen here. That won't happen here because that's not the climate I live in. Oh, that shouldn't matter because everybody's climate can have some kind of natural disaster of some kind. It just might be different depending on where you are. And then, of course, if you really start focusing on the conspiracy theory side of things, you're definitely going to lose a lot of people. And as I've said many times, there are certain theories that are actually facts, and there are theories that are actually just a bunch of nonsense, crazy talk. And you have to be careful about what you start glomming onto and then start telling people, because that was the problem I had at the beginning. I started glomming onto every single conspiracy theory there was back then, until I started waking up and realizing these aren't all true. Some of them, yes, some of them, no. And so people just see you as crazy. They're not going to listen to you. So here's the most important thing. The best way you're going to reach people and show them the importance is just to let them see it's real life. It's the day-to-day, mundane things that happen to everyone. I was going to make some spaghetti sauce today, but I just realized I'm out of tomato paste, canned tomatoes, tomato sauce, whatever it is people use. I'm all out. I guess I can't make it today, or I've got to make that trip to the store for this one thing that I'm out of. Well, when you have a nice little pantry of plenty of that kind of stuff put up, the stuff especially stuff you're going to use the most, you don't have to worry about it. I mean, that was one of the first things I could say got me into having food storage. It wasn't any fear talk or scared of anything horrible happening. It was, man, I was really in the mood for making some spaghetti today, or pizza today, or lasagna today. But I'm all out of canned tomatoes, and now I got to run to the store. I hate that. And then I started thinking, well, this is before I started growing tomatoes of my own. I was like, well, the next time I go to the store, or the next time those canned tomatoes, I'd get the pureed ones. The next time they're on sale, I'm going to stock up on a bunch of them so that I have plenty of tomatoes when I'm in the mood for making one of my favorite Italian dishes. Or I'm in the mood for making chili because I use canned tomatoes in that as well. Or, there's those things like you get really sick and you just can't run to the store and get what you need. Well, you've got your either your homemade medicinals from your own medicinal herb garden, or you've stocked up on maybe some over the counter stuff you need to get you through this illness, or you've got all the food in your pantry you need to just go ahead and make dinner and not have to go out into public and worry about getting other people sick, and worry about, you're just not feeling good enough to do it anyway. I mean, there's so many day-to-day scenarios that happen all the time. And these are the stories that people need to hear. And it can be as simple as you don't want to just go, okay, sit down. I want to tell you some stuff. You're just talking, you're hanging out with your friends, you're hanging out with your family. And when it feels right to kind of work it into the conversation, because you know how conversations go, you hop from one subject to another, and I'm really bad at doing that, even right in the middle of what I'm saying, like I'm doing right now. You just kind of naturally let it flow into, oh man, you know what happened to me the other day? I had company that dropped by, or I had this going on, and I was so glad that I had extra of this, that, or the other thing. So I didn't have to run to the store, or maybe the store was out, but that's okay because I had plenty stocked up. Or, if this was 2020, you're like, oh man, I'm so glad that, had a good stock of toilet paper, or I've been doing the cloth wipes for so long. I don't even have to worry about the toilet paper outage, or whatever the case is, and especially when something happens, like, around here, all the power outages, and then you get on Facebook and everybody's whining and complaining because they're cold or they're this or they're that. And then I don't usually say something unless somebody asks a question, because you have to be careful about that too, because if you come in there guns blazing, they're going to be like, well, it's just going to sound like you're being holier than thou with your preparedness. There's ways that you can very gently, very politely just remind people that, it does really help, if you make sure, since power outages are pretty common here, it'd be a good idea to consider having some extra this on hand and some extra that on hand, and a way to maybe cook your food. Just things like that. It's all about the approach, because too many times we get so into the fear-mongering mindset that people don't want to hear it. They get enough bad news in the news. They don't need to feel like they got to act on something as a result of fear. Now, some people do, but for the most part, people want real life. They want to see the convenience. They want to see the frugality of putting up. So that's some other things. It's like, okay, well, if I stock up on these tomatoes when they're on sale, now I've just saved myself money in the future for when I do use those. And it's convenient because they're there. Tina's tiny living here. Every now and then, she's been really working over the years to kind of get herself in a better place for those very kind of moments. And so she'll share it very politely on Facebook. It's like, oh, it's so nice having this jackery, or this, she has a few different things. And now life can continue on. It's those kind of things. And then people interact and they see that, and it gets them thinking, oh, that's a good idea. Well, gosh, if Tina can do it, I can do it too. Those kind of things. And so you got to just be loving, and understand, if you were on the other side hearing the conversation, how would you take it? Put yourself in their shoes. And I've shared this several times, but I'm the kind of person, when people come in and say, well, you should do this, I'm like, oh, really? You think I should? Do you know me well enough to tell me that? Or even if their family is like, who are you to tell me I should do what you think I should do? It's immediate turnoff for me. And it is for many other people. So put yourself in their shoes, consider the stress they may be currently under if they are in the middle of a power outage or some other stressful event that could have been a lot easier had they taken a few extra steps to just have a little bit extra in their food storage and, have some sort of lighting or whatever the case may be. All right, so that's mostly what I wanted to say on that particular question. So number 2 was fresh milled flowers. Somebody sent me an email and they were talking about how they had switched to milling their own flowers, and they found they were having a lot of problems with the rise of their breads when they did that, and over buying, like, I'm assuming they meant store-bought whole grain flours, if I remember correctly. So they were buying the flours, but they were already milled up. Well, there's a few things. Some of it can be the type of grain. Different type of grains have different weights to them. So you have like your softer grains that they're actually go through the mill a lot easier, but for some reason take longer. Softer grains can be good for more delicate things like pie crusts and biscuits, where for your yeast breads, you're better off going with your harder grains. I personally like using a blend of a soft and a hard. That not only makes the harder grains, even though they're harder to mill, it takes more effort, especially if you're doing it by hand. But when they're mixed with the soft grains, it just makes this perfect blend where they go through the grain mill. They're easy enough to turn, but they go through quickly. I know that doesn't make sense. I thought it was weird too, but that was something I learned from experience. But that blend also works good for pretty much everything. However, here's the other thing. I very rarely ever use only my fresh milled grains, because especially if I'm making a yeast bread or biscuits, if it's pie crust, that's fine. Something that doesn't need to rise, that's fine. Or even pancakes, that's fine. But when it comes to something like your yeast breads or sourdough, that kind of stuff, I use a blend, a 50-50 blend of my whole milled flour of the barley and the hard white wheat and the unbleached white flour. So I only get the organic unbleached white flour from, you can get Costco carries some for a pretty good price, and I get it from Azure Standard. So I use a 50-50 blend so I can get the best rise, but still get a lot of the good benefits of the whole grains in there as well. And then the other thing that she was asking about was she was using the red wheat. I don't use red wheat. I don't like red wheat. It's got that some people do. I've never liked red wheat. I finally realized when I was older why I didn't like wheat. It was the red wheat. But the white wheat, I like the flavor of white wheat so much better. It's very mild. That's my personal preference. I've played around with spelt. I like that too, mixed with the hard white wheat. What else have I done? I know I've messed around with like emmer and einkorn as well, but those are really expensive. So that's the only reason. I found I like them just as much as the hard white wheat, but they're spendy. I've also used soft white wheat, but instead of using that now, that I replace that with the barley, which is a soft grain, but barley's just got some other health benefits that maybe your wheat isn't going to have, and it's just super good for you. So yeah, that's just something to consider. I'm sure playing around with a lot of that, you're going to find what's going to work best for you. Okay, how do I powder pumpkin? So I do have a video on making it's squash powder. So it doesn't have to just be pumpkin, but that's typically what I'm doing. But I've made it with spaghetti squash and I think another kind of squash. Usually it's spaghetti and pumpkin that I'm growing. Any pumpkin, any squash, that is. You cook it, you dehydrate it, and then you powder it or whatever, and then use it however you want. This last year was the first year I actually made a pie from my pumpkin powder. It was so good. And dehydrating and powdering the squash to me is the best way to preserve it. It takes up way less room than canning or freezing. And I mean, you can put, I figured it out before, but I'm thinking probably about a half gallon of pumpkin puree or squash puree. Once it's dehydrated up, you can fit it into a pint jar. That's a guess. I don't remember exactly. I know I say in that video, I give the ratios in that video that I have linked down there. But she was asking about, the person that was asking this question was what part? Well, the flesh, the part that you typically eat. Now, some people, if you've got a thin enough skin on it, you could powder that up too if you wanted to. I don't. Usually the skin's kind of at that pretty hard point by the time the pumpkin or, all that, the type of squash that I grow, by the time it's ripe enough, that I just don't bother with that. So that's why I bake it first until it's soft. And then I scrape it out of the skin and then spread it on my dehydrator trays and then dry it up. But some people do powder up the skin and use that as well. So I think that'll really depend on the type of squash you're talking about. So I just don't have a desire to do that with that because it's just so tough. And I don't really want that very fibrous stuff in there. Okay, so that was number 3. Number 4. It was another similar type question. Do I powder the whole citrus peel? I do. So, but here's the thing. Now, some people, if you're talking about an orange, well, the pith is going to be the most bitter part. And so if you're talking about a regular standard orange and it's got a thick pith on it, you may not want to do that. You might want to save those peels for making vinegars and whatnot. Just keep in mind that the more pith that's in your citrus peel, when you go to make a vinegar, that's more that's going to disintegrate and make a kind of thick and very cloudy vinegar, but you can still strain that out through a fine cloth. But because our favorite types of oranges or citrus fruit are like clementines, mandarins, anything that has the very thin skin on them anyway, I don't bother trying to remove the pith. It's about pointless because it's so thin. So I just dehydrate up the whole peel and powder the whole peel up. And I think I linked to that video as well where I talked about the benefits and uses for citrus peels. And I use citrus peels a lot for a lot of things. And it's just, it's a great way to just make the most out of your fruits, is using those peels that you might not just normally chomp on and using them in other ways. And it can be a great way too to add more nutrition to different things. I use the peels that I leave in chunks, I'll use in teas and tinctures like the elderberry tincture, and the citrus peels are going to be high in quercetin. So even if you're cooking whatever it is and you lose a lot of your vitamin C out of it as a result, you're actually going to be bringing out more of that quercetin. So you're getting that good nutrient when you're doing that. So it doesn't matter which way you go. If you eat your citrus peel raw or just dehydrated, you're going to get the vitamin C. But if you cook it and simmer it for a long time, then you're going to get the quercetin. You'll still have a little bit of vitamin C, but you're going to get more of that quercetin. Okay, so it just brings that out. Just like cooking tomatoes, you might lose some of that vitamin C, but you're going to bring out that lycopene. So there's, when people talk about like cooking food as just ruining everything, that's not necessarily true. Well, it's not true, period. You're not ruining everything by cooking it. You can be losing some of certain nutrients, but typically you're going to be bringing out more of others. And that's what makes it so great. So eat some things raw, some things cooked, and it's all good. You're still always going to be getting your minerals. You don't cook out minerals. It doesn't happen that way. It's just, what did I say? See if I remember. The nutrients you're going to lose when you cook your foods, and even then, it depends on how long you cook it and how hot, you're still not going to lose all of them. And this includes canning, but the nutrients you're going to lose first are going to be your vitamin A, vitamin C, and then 2 of your B vitamins. If I remember correctly, it's thiamine and riboflavin. And everything else was going to remain intact. So, people don't need to freak out about cooking their food. Not everything should be eaten raw anyway. Certain things, it's better if you cook them. It's better for your gut, and it might be better for your thyroid. Like if you have any thyroid issues, you should be cooking all your brassicas. because of the goitrogens. If you cook your broccoli well, your cauliflower, all that stuff, your kale, your cabbage. I love raw cabbage too, but I try not to eat very much of it for that. Well, the kimchi is raw. So that's another reason why I try not to eat too much, to make sure I can keep my thyroid healthy, because eating it raw is going to, it's higher in the goitrogens, and those can be kind of hard on the thyroid. But, as long as you're consuming it in moderation, it's okay. Somebody asked about, can they add the elderberry tincture to their coffee or their tea? Just put in a few drops or something, or a teaspoon. Sure, you can do that if you want. However, if you're going to make tea, maybe not the coffee so much, but if you're going to make tea anyway, just make your tea with all those same things instead of using your tincture for that. Because that's a real common kind of tea I make, is using those spices, and a lot of times throwing some of the dried elderberries in there and then simmering it and just letting that all infuse into the water. So make it more like a decoction. And where a tincture can take, you want it to sit for at least a couple of months so it gets really strong. Instead of using all that up, just make yourself some tea, make yourself a decoction. So if people are wondering what the difference, so you have an herbal infusion, which we always call tea, but if you want to be technical, tea really only refers to the tea plant, which is the Camellia sinensis or the Camellia japonica. And all of your true teas come from that: green, white, oolong, and black. All come from the same plant. But we call herbal teas teas. It's easy. So, and people know what we're talking about. But, anyway, the difference between just making an herbal tea, that's usually you're using more delicate herbs. That's where you're going to be more likely to just pour the hot water over the herbs and then let it steep for a bit. Where a decoction is something you're going to simmer for a while, and maybe even simmer it down to about 2/3, 50% of the volume that was once there. And that's what when you're doing that, you're using that method with anything like your elderberries, your woody things like your cloves, your star anise, your cinnamon, your citrus peels, especially if you're trying to get that quercetin out. So astragalus root, any kind of root, turkey tail mushrooms, that kind of stuff. So that's the difference. Can I use the oven for dehydrating? Absolutely. Now, personally, I would not use my oven for dehydrating delicate herbs, just because you might not be able to get the oven at a low enough temperature that would prevent it from burning or maybe damaging some of the benefits of your more delicate herbs. But for dehydrating meats, vegetables, fruits, as long as you have it set on the lowest temperature, and even crack your door open a little bit so there's airflow, because the airflow is going to be important to release the moisture out. So the first thing I ever dehydrated, ever, was long before I had an electric dehydrator. And it was before we had the kind of wood stove we had now. We just had to insert, and you couldn't do anything on that because there's nothing to set anything on. But I used my oven to make deer jerky. Never had made jerky before, but I had my oven. I don't even think I had any racks to put on there. I just had cookie sheets, and I just, I marinated the meat, and then, I had it all cut up nice and small, and then laid it out on cookie sheets. I don't remember how long it took, but I had the oven turned all the way down. It took pretty much all day, and then I just periodically, every hour or so, go check it, turn stuff over. It's a little more tedious than using a dehydrator, but it works. If you just experiment with different things, you'll find different things that work. So just like me dehydrating some mushrooms recently on, I've always just dehydrated mushrooms using the electric dehydrators, but I try not to run them in the winter if I can help it. I try to do as much stuff using the wood stove, and I'm like, I hate putting that rack on top of the wood stove because it takes up so much space, And this time of year, we're doing everything on there. I'm making the dinner on there. We got water heating up on there. We got coffee. We got tea. I got my dinner trying to cook. And that rack takes up the most important part of that space. And I can put stuff behind it, but then it's a real hassle to try to get back there and get it. So I like being able to dry stuff on the dehydrator racks next to the wood stove as much as possible, but some things don't dry fast enough there. It depends on what it is. So I'm always experimenting. I've done it with turkey tail mushrooms too. Mushrooms dehydrate up so easily that that worked really good. So I went ahead and ordered some more just regular, the little, what are they called? Criminy mushrooms, little brown ones. I ordered up some more of those from Misfits Market. They'll be here Friday, and I'm going to cut them up and dehydrate those too, because as long as I got fires going and I know that works, I'll do that. I dehydrated yogurt next to the wood stove, I think last year, and that worked out really good. Would I do milk that way? Probably not. My eggs? No. I usually only do the eggs anyway in the top of the season when the chickens are all laying and we've got enough solar power that I can just run the dehydrator anyway. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And again, thanks for coming in. Take care and God bless.